The manager humiliated her in front of everyone, then froze when he saw her name on one document. No one in that dealership had any idea they were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. On a quiet Tuesday morning, when the showroom floor was polished and calm, a black woman stepped through the glass doors of one of the most successful luxury car dealerships in the city. There was nothing about her appearance that demanded attention. She wore simple, well-kept clothes. No designer labels, no expensive handbag, no flashy jewelry. Her hair was neatly pulled back, and in her hand was a small notebook, the kind most people wouldn't look at twice. To anyone watching, she looked like just another customer browsing, maybe dreaming, maybe passing time. Sales associates glanced at her briefly, then looked away. She moved slowly across the showroom, stopping to admire a sleek red sedan, running her fingers lightly along the edge of the door, taking quiet notes. Minutes passed. Other customers walked in and were immediately greeted with smiles, handshakes, and offers of coffee. She wasn't. And that was exactly what she was there to see. What no one in the room realized was this. She wasn't there to shop. She owned the entire dealership. Her name was Danielle Carter, and she was the CEO of a fast-growing automotive empire with locations across 3 states. Over the past year, her company had expanded rapidly, winning awards and breaking sales records. On paper, everything looked perfect, but behind the scenes, something didn't sit right. Danielle had been receiving anonymous emails, messages from customers, and even former employees. The stories were disturbingly similar: being ignored, talked down to, judged by appearance, and treated as if they didn't belong. The complaints often mentioned the same thing: subtle discrimination that was hard to prove but impossible to ignore. Danielle could have sent in auditors. She could have held meetings or reviewed reports. She could have fired managers based on numbers alone. But Danielle believed something different. She believed the truth reveals itself when people think no one important is watching. So instead of announcing her visit or arriving in a luxury car with an entourage, she chose to disappear into plain sight. No title, no authority, no special treatment. Just a woman walking into her own dealership, ready to see how people behaved when they thought she didn't matter. And what she was about to witness would change everything. Danielle walked slowly across the showroom floor, her footsteps nearly silent against the polished marble. She stopped beside a red luxury sedan, its surface gleaming under the showroom lights. She opened her notebook, jotting down small details: the model year, the trim, the condition of the interior. She opened the driver's door, inhaled the new leather scent, and examined the dashboard with a practiced eye. Then she waited. Seconds turned into minutes. Sales associates passed within arm's reach, laughing with other customers, offering brochures, espresso, and test drives. A well-dressed white couple was immediately welcomed and seated comfortably, coffee cups placed in their hands. Moments later, a man in a tailored suit walked in and was instantly escorted toward the most expensive vehicles on the floor. Danielle watched it all. No one acknowledged her presence. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was quiet, subtle, and painfully familiar. She closed the car door gently and walked toward the front desk, her posture calm, her expression neutral. When she reached the counter, she smiled politely. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but confident. "Could someone help me with pricing on this model?" The manager, Brad Thompson, barely glanced up from his screen. When he did, his eyes lingered, not with interest, but with judgment. He didn't smile. He didn't stand. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, slowly scanning her from head to toe. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "this dealership specializes in premium vehicles. Are you sure you're in the right place?" The words landed hard. Danielle felt the familiar weight of them, but she didn't flinch. "Yes," she replied calmly. "I'm interested in learning more about this car." Brad let out an exaggerated sigh, tapping his pen against the desk. "Look," he said, lowering his voice as if offering advice. "We're very busy today. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the used car lot down the road." A few nearby employees shifted uncomfortably. One avoided eye contact. Another glanced at Danielle, then quickly looked away. Danielle paused. Then she nodded slowly, as if considering his suggestion. Without raising her voice or showing emotion, she turned and walked back toward the red sedan. Brad smirked, already returning to his computer. But as Danielle reached the car, She placed her hand on the door handle again, this time with intention. That's when Brad's patience snapped, and that single moment would set off a chain reaction he never saw coming. Danielle opened the driver's door once more, carefully leaning inside to examine the interior. Her eyes scanned the dashboard, the stitching on the leather seats, the digital display, details she knew better than anyone. She made another note in her notebook, calm and focused, as if the rest of the showroom didn't exist. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Hey, you can't touch that vehicle without permission." Brad's chair scraped loudly as he stood up. Heads turned instantly. Danielle straightened and looked at him, her expression composed. "I'm just looking," she said calmly. "That's what cars on display are for." Brad's face flushed red. His jaw tightened as embarrassment and anger mixed together. Instead of lowering his voice, he raised it. "You've been walking around here all morning," he snapped. "And now you're touching inventory without authorization." He pulled his phone from his pocket with exaggerated force and turned away from her just enough to make a show of it. "Security," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I need you on the floor. There's a woman causing a disturbance." The effect was immediate. Conversation died mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze in midair. Customers stared openly now, unsure whether they were witnessing a misunderstanding or something far worse. Sales associates stood frozen, eyes darting between Brad and Danielle, afraid to step in. Danielle slowly closed the car door, the soft click echoing in the sudden silence. She turned to face Brad fully. "A disturbance?" she asked evenly. "For looking at a car in a showroom?" Brad crossed his arms, puffing out his chest as if asserting authority. "You've been loitering," he said. "You're making people uncomfortable." Danielle glanced around. No one looked uncomfortable, except the employees who knew this had gone too far. That's when the heavy footsteps approached. Two security guards appeared from the side hallway, their radios crackling. One looked confused, the other uneasy. "Sir," one guard asked, "what seems to be the problem?" Before Brad could answer, Danielle calmly reached into her coat. The guard stiffened slightly, but she showed no fear, no rush, no hesitation. She pulled out a sleek black folder, smooth and well-worn, and held it at her side. Brad laughed nervously. "Oh, what is this now?" he scoffed. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Danielle raised her eyes to meet his, her voice steady and unmistakably firm. "Before anyone leaves," she said, "you should take a look at what's inside this folder." The guards exchanged a glance. Brad hesitated, and in that brief moment of uncertainty, everything in that dealership was about to change. Danielle opened the folder with deliberate calm and slid a single document across the counter toward Brad. "Before you do anything else," she said evenly, "you might want to read that." Brad let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Ma'am, I don't have time for." Then he looked down. The color drained from his face so quickly it was almost shocking. His confident posture collapsed as his eyes raced across the page, rereading the words as if hoping they would change. They didn't. The document was a corporate ownership certificate, stamped, signed, and official. And at the very top, printed in bold, unmistakable letters, was her name. Danielle Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Brad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The security guards froze mid-step, glancing from the document to Danielle, then back to Brad. One of them quietly lowered his hand from his radio. From across the showroom, a hushed voice broke the silence. "Wait," a salesperson whispered. "That's the owner." The words rippled through the room like a shockwave. Conversation stopped entirely. Customers stared openly now, some pulling out their phones, others watching with wide eyes as reality set in. Brad's hands began to shake. The paper trembled between his fingers. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice suddenly small. "If I had known, I would have." Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "That's the problem," she said calmly. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to know." She turned slowly toward the staff, her eyes steady and clear. "Every customer who walks through these doors deserves respect," she said. "No matter how they look, no matter how they dress, no matter how quietly they speak." Some employees lowered their heads. Others swallowed hard. Danielle turned back to Brad, meeting his gaze without anger, only truth. "You judged me," she said. "You ignored me. And when I didn't disappear the way you expected, you tried to have me removed from my own business." Brad looked around the showroom, searching for support. There was none. The silence was heavy now, thick with realization, regret, and fear. Even the hum of the showroom lights seemed louder than before. Danielle stood there, calm and unshaken, while everything Brad thought he knew about power, authority, and control crumbled in front of him. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood something clearly. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. This was about accountability. Danielle raised her hand slightly, and the security guards immediately stepped back. There was no confusion now, only respect. They moved aside without a word, standing at attention as if the air itself had shifted. Then Danielle turned to face the entire dealership. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Effective immediately," she said. "Brad Thompson is no longer employed here." The words landed like a final gavel strike. Brad's knees nearly buckled. He reached for the counter to steady himself, his face pale, his earlier confidence completely gone. No one rushed to defend him. No one spoke his name. Danielle continued, her tone firm but measured. "This dealership will undergo mandatory retraining for all staff," she said. "Every customer interaction will be reviewed weekly, and discrimination of any kind ends today. No exceptions." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in. Then her eyes moved across the showroom and stopped on a young sales associate near the back. He had been the one who shifted uncomfortably earlier, the one who looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. She pointed gently. "You," she said. "You noticed something was wrong. That matters." The associate blinked in shock. "You're now the acting floor manager," Danielle added. "Leadership starts with awareness." The room released a collective breath, as if everyone had been holding it in for far too long. Some employees nodded quietly. Others wiped their hands against their slacks, relieved and humbled. Danielle gathered her folder and turned toward the exit, but stopped. She walked back to the red luxury sedan, running her hand across the smooth surface one last time. The same car she had been told she didn't belong near. "I'll take this one," she said with a small, knowing smile. A few days later, Danielle shared her experience with her executive team, not to shame individuals, but to expose a system that needed fixing. Policies were rewritten, training programs were rebuilt, leadership standards were raised, and the changes didn't stop at one dealership. Across the company, a new culture took root, one built on respect, accountability, and dignity. Because Danielle didn't just want successful dealerships, she wanted fair ones. And sometimes, the most powerful lesson comes not from who you think holds power, but from realizing, too late, who was standing right in front of you all along. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and jaw-dropping stories every week. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next twist-filled episode. See you in the next video.